Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendocha, Dr. Speed Selling is the Raging Verbalist, and this is number 97. We're counting down to, or counting up to, I guess. Counting up to. I mean, I guess if you were in the government, you'd be saying we're only counting down to 100, but we're counting up to 100 soon. So bear with us and keep watching where this is. Let me just tell you what the Raging Verbalist is all about. We talk about a variety of topics, things that interest me, things that interest you, something that you toss to us. And of course, we are on YouTube, we are on Facebook, and you can add to this. And as always, joining me is the lovely Sandra. Sandra, welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. I mean, this is going to be a great topic. I know that. I feel it. I feel like we have the right topic. So, all right. So, and for those of you who do not know how to join us, all you have to do is go to Position to Win book group on Facebook and join us. And you can always ask a question. Be nice. Sandra will look at it. And she, in fact, what her role is to be in your seat and ask the tough questions of me, the Raging Verbalist, and see what kind of things come off the top of my stack. So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about Gen Z. So first question, who is Gen Z?
Well, for those of you who don't know this big word called demographics, and and I say it that way because I hear a lot of people talk about demographics who have no clue. Probably that you're not going to find a lot of other people who are so fascinated by it. I used to actually subscribe to American Demographics. That magazine, like other magazines, bit the dust, but that's a different issue. But demographics are a study of populations and how populations go and move and all of that. Now, this is not like astrology. We're not looking up to the sky and saying, are you a Gemini on the cusp of Taurus or something like that? But what demographics are is to look at groups of populations and how they come together. And Gen Z are essentially those people who are born from about 1995, 96 to 2010, 2012. And that group is considered the Gen Z-ers. And that will determine a lot of what they are going to experience at the same time. Now, the reason why demographics actually works, Peter Drucker called it one of the most impressive ways. He didn't say impressive. He said one of the most consistent ways to predict behavior and what was going to take place and how things were going to work in a particular society, because there are all these shared events that happen. And these shared events, of course, shape, mold, and bring about these kind of changes over time. And Gen Z are no different because, again, they're born from 95, 96 to 2010, 2012, right in that area. And they're right now hitting that formidable age and what they're going to do. So that's what the Gens, that's who they are. And that's that bracket that they are.
All right, so can you break down the various groups?
Well, the easiest way to understand it and we'll take post-World War II, because now there are people who are older than that, but from 1946 until and it used to be earlier than this, but demographers are always changing it. Now, by the way, we should probably do a disclaimer. We were talking about this before we got on, and the disclaimer is that we're not talking any group that we're talking about generalities. So if you say, oh, that's not me, that's not how, now we're talking about kind of general sense about what things are. So anyway, we have all of those people who were born as baby boomers, and baby boomers happened because the war ended and the guys came home and sex ensued and children happened. I mean, I know if that's like too much adult language for all of you, sorry. I'm the one just having to bring you the truth, but that's what happened. Everybody came home and said, let's go and populate. And we have what were called early boomers and late boomers. We don't even need to get into that. So that was, up until like 64. Then we have the Gen Xers, and the Gen Xers are from 1965 to 1979. And that's that next group. So all of the boomers then start having babies, and those are Gen Xers. Gen Yers, and I think we may have a Gen Yer. Now, I don't want to embarrass the lovely Sandra, but Sandra, what where do you fall in this malaise of stuff? Where are you at? Because of course the next Gen Ys are millennials, and they're really from about 1980 to 94. So where do you fit into this whole thing?
I am a millennial.
So
So,
okay. Look out. We have a millennial. And
entitled what? I heard that that's the number one word that describes my age group. It was entitled. So I guess I'm entitled.
there you go. There you go. She's lovely and entitled. That's, but we'll leave that maybe for another day. So anyway, so then we have millennials, and then after we have millennials, we have Gen Z, or which is what we're talking about today. So right there, we kind of cover everybody from about 74 years old to in their late teens. And yes, there's somebody who comes after Gen Z. So trust me, they will be another pain in the ass generation coming just after that, and that will be taking place.
Okay, so what are the different things that Gen Z kind of looks at?
So here's an interesting thing about Gen Z, and for those of you who want to understand it, again, every generation has their own quirks and their own sense of what's going on and what's taking place. So if you think that you escape or that your generation is better, I don't know if you know this expression, but it's SOS, which is same old shit. So there's a kind of SOS factor that goes on because everybody has their own quirkiness. But so the Gen Zers are the first digital natives. And that's important because digital natives means that they have experienced the world digitally all the way through their life. So this is a big deal. This is a big demarcation. Because if you were born in 95-ish, right, 95, 96, if you're born then, this thing called the internet really was starting to take off, and all of that was taking place. Now, I'm going to just give a contrast, which is, since I'm a baby boomer, by the time that I started hitting a certain age, and by the way, if you want to look at a real demarcation point just for yourself, here's a little side note, is that you figure out what happened when you were 10 years old. So you find out how old you are. You should know that, and find out when you were 10. And if you go back and examine all of the things that happened when you were 10 in the world, that will be a year that will shape a lot of what happens in your life. Now, that's not a demographer's point of view, but there's some clear study that has been done in that arena. So what happens is that the Gen Zers are the digital natives, which means that they have been exposed to the digital world since day one. Now, for me, being a baby boomer, I really was like the television generation, in which I was that of that age that when I came home from school, unlike my brother who's a little bit older, he's still a baby boomer, but he's an early boomer and I'm a late boomer. I don't know, something like that. But anyway, whenever I would come home from school, motor my way home, zipping along, all that stuff. One of the things that, of course, I did was, especially if the weather wasn't really good, is pop that TV on and start watching television, which, of course, my father, when he got home, the first thing he did was turned off the television because he said it's going to ruin your eyes and ruin your brain, and quit doing that, because it's, not that he didn't watch TV, but it was just, it was generational issues. So what the digital part is that the Gen Zers are in fact the first time they're looking at all types of digital things over and over and over again. Now, this means that about 40% of adult Gen Zers, that's 18 to 23-year-olds, say that their purchasing decisions are most influenced by social media. So social media actually has that big of an effect on them. And they are, in fact, looking at that. Now, here's the sad news. If you are in the newspaper world, right now, about 3% of Gen Zers even know what the hell a newspaper is, let alone what to do with the newspaper. And in fact, 39% of their decisions are based upon social media. And that is a big, big percentage. And then another 26% of that is based upon online reviews, blogs, and websites. So if you add those two up, you got a very big number, because what you have is you have 65%, 2/3 of their decisions are based upon those types of factors. So that's one of the things which makes Gen Z people more interesting than ever. Now, having said that, I just want to share with all of you out there. And if you, by the way, if you are a Gen Zer and you're watching this, I hope you are. If you're watching this, understand that I studied demography. I studied this because, of course, that's how I got to the point of where I ended up writing a book. And this book is not stuck in a demographic skew. This is covers all over the place. So if you have not picked this up, you should do that, because what you want to do is pick up. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it. And this applies to every single generation out there. If you do not position yourself to win, you are in fact going to lose in this marketplace. If you do not figure out how to overcome these things, you're going to be unsuccessful. You can pick this up digitally, by the way, on Kindle, Nook, Apple, iBooks, whatever their book thing's called. You can also pick it up physically, or you can go to positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com. Check it out. There's free stuff there. Why would you go there and check out the free stuff? Plus, you can also order one of these things, which is actual real paper, and ask me to sign it. Also, we wrote another book called Remote Work for a Better World. That's available exclusively on the Kindle and Kindle format, and you can go check that out. So, what is the next question, Sandra?
All right. So have you had close encounters with Gen Zers, and what was your experience like?
So Gen Zers are considered truth seekers. And whenever I hear somebody say that, my hair stands up a little bit on the back of my neck, because that usually means like bullshit. So well, because when people say I'm a truth seeker, it's like, well, I don't know, how much truth do you really want? It's could get a little nasty. But so my favorite example of my close encounter with some Gen Zers is that I have a timeshare in San Diego, and what you'll see is you'll have these people who are sitting there who are very socially conscious. So there's a social consciousness that exists in these truth seekers. And again, I'm not opposed to that, but I believe that actions speak louder than nonsense, and speak louder than sitting there trying to, put out some of, oh, I'm just going to think about it. Anyway, so I have these Gen Zers, a couple of them are sitting there, and I could tell they're Gen Zers. I mean, now it's not like they have like a little Z on their forehead or something. I think that, isn't that what Harry Potter has, like some little, mark on his forehead or something? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
we're not going to quite go with that one, but anyway. So anyway, this Gen Z guy walks up to me, and of course he looks at me because he's trying to, of course, be an advocate, and he sits there and he starts talking to me about how important it is that, we have to deal with climate change. We have to deal with global warming. The world is coming to an end. By the way, anybody out there who believes it's coming to end in 12 years, and I know this might be controversial for some of you, I want to borrow money that I'm going to pay you back in the 13th year, because then I don't have to worry about it all, right? Because if the world's going to end, let's party until it's over. Just say it. Anyway, so this guy tells me that, hey, let me talk to you. Let me kind of rain on your parade. And I stopped on him and I said, stop, because let me ask you this. Do you know what your carbon footprint is? And he goes, no. And I said, well, yours is bigger than mine. He goes, well, I don't know about that. I mean, I believe in the cause. I believe in I said, well, I have 40 solar panels on my roof. How many solar panels do you have? And the guy says, well, I don't have any solar panels because I rent. And I said, well, what excuse is that? I mean, if we're all in this together to save the planet, you should be buying solar panels, putting it on your landlord's roof, and helping out the planet. I mean, somewhere there is a polar bear wheezing, somewhere there's, a koala that needs, a sinus condition. Come on, let's get in it. So as I talked to them, it became very interesting, because his head started to kind of like explode. And of course, the other person came to his aid and tried to extricate him from it. But again, I am not a person who walks away from an argument. And again, we had a discussion upon a discussion. The point of it is that yes, I have encountered Gen Zs. Now that was just an extreme case, but that was an example of a Gen Z who had a great deal of what I call righteous indignation. And I can tell you that that will always get you in trouble, because if you believe that you're going to be able to know the reality and the truth of everything, then you're going to be riding for a fall at some point in time. So that was mine. Have you had an experience, Sandra, with a Gen Z, either close to you or out there in the wilderness?
Yes. And it was a negative experience, unfortunately.
Well, share.
Well, there's a couple. So one, it was an intern from a previous job, and she had been missing for a great deal of time, and then she just randomly shows up and it's like, hey, we've been trying to get a hold of you. What happened? I was sleeping. And I was like, okay. And then we gave her all this information of stuff she needed to do and whatever. And she just like was kind of half looking at her phone, not really paying attention. Then she just looks up, can you just text me that? It's just like, I don't need your help anymore, please. You're done. That lasted like a day. And then the other one, of course, it's people I know, but they went on to do all sorts of amazing things. They learned sign language when they were younger. They went to the Junior Olympics. One has recently become a doctor. So it's like two very opposite people. One who took as much of that digital information and opportunity as possible to propel themselves, and then someone who decided to sleep and use the technology for social media and what are celebrities up to. So there you go.
Well, and I have to say, if you are a Gen Z, the bar in a lot of ways is set pretty low. So if you will get off of your rear end and do stuff, you will probably be very successful. And one of the mistakes that I see a lot and this isn't just Gen Z, it's all generations, are people who kind of are coasters. They're kind of like coasting along in life. And there's a lot of people who because of the wealth of society, I know people will say, oh, I'm not that wealthy, but the wealth of this society is that you can coast along pretty well. So if you're out there and you're willing to hustle, I think you can really make some things work to your advantage. So yeah, so those are some of our and by the way, the whole texting thing, that gets back to something that I learned a long time ago, which is you always should ask people what is their preferred method of communication. Interestingly enough, there's a really big push for Gen Z. Latest survey that they don't really want to talk on the phone; they'd rather text or they'd rather do other things. I believe that's a trend that will probably reverse at some point in time, and that means if you can actually connect and talk to people, you're going to do better than not. Humans, in the end, I believe humans will want to communicate one way or the other. So what is our next question? What do we have next?
Yeah, so following up with your close encounter of the Gen Z kind, what's a positive? What are some positives with Gen Z that you've come across?
Well, I think the positives I've seen are the fact that they do have a value system. Again, there is no broad brush. Not everybody's in the same bin, and since they do have a value system, that means that they're actually trying to achieve some goal, achieve some end. And I think that's a positive. I think that it's great when somebody has a sense of a purpose and a sense of worth and what they want to do. I think that the other part of it is that they're interested in ethical behavior, which again, that can also be get convoluted. They also are looking for uniqueness. So uniqueness becomes a big deal. And if you're in the business, I'm always, and that's one of the reasons why we talk about it in the book, we're always talking about uniqueness, and how you have to figure out how to become unique. I always like to say that everybody wants to be unique, but nobody wants to be different. But in this case, people want to be unique. So I think that those are the positives. And also the fact that if you are willing to embrace technology, this is to me the mistake that happens generation after generation after generation. Those who embrace technology, whatever that technology may be, and utilizes it and leverages it for themselves, usually are more successful than those who do not. And I would highly encourage anybody to learn from that model. One last kind of caveat, though, is that there is virtually no documentation on anything anymore. So it's essentially trial by error, which I find unnerving, not because I can't do it, but because it's such a waste of time. I'd rather have something where I can learn a technique or learn something. Now, we have YouTube, so we can go find some of these things, but so those are the positives, I think, is that, I think that it's great to have people who do believe in something. Now, some of the things they believe in, I don't believe in either, but I'm always looking for people who actually have a place to stand and are willing to stand on it.
All right. So how do you have to change your message to match the different generational shifts, and in particular with Gen Z?
Well, I think if you're going to do that, since the behavior is that there's lots and lots of communications going on, there's lots of things that are taking place, is that you are going to need to incorporate social networks. You have to make sure that you develop that mobility concept. I mean, to think about how, just a few years ago, and for those who don't know it, but desktop computing has been on the decline for years. Laptops, with the exception of one category, which is like the kind with the touch screen, the convertible kind, has been on the decline as far as number of units being sold. The number of people who are buying tablets is up. The number of people who buy, obviously, smartphones are through the roof. Is that you're going to have to learn how to communicate those messages there. Also, time is a big deal. People aren't going to watch, and we're always thinking about this with Raging Verbalist. How long should it be? When I first started out, I thought, well, we're going to do a really long format. I do long format stuff other parts of my life, and we do much shorter videos. And in fact, these are significantly longer than most people watch. And now I'm starting to see YouTube Shorts and TikTok, and who knows where we're going to get to. We're going to probably get to where we're going to have 10-second videos. Snapchat tried it for a while, but I think we may actually get there. And I think that the question is how do you hone your message so it fits into that kind of media, because that's what we're talking about. When I first started doing advertising and getting serious about media advertising, radio, television, eventually the internet, is that I learned that you only have so many seconds. At one point in time, all commercials were like a minute, and then they went to, heaven forbid, a half a minute, and now they're down to 20 seconds, and they're 15 seconds, and now on the internet there are 5 and 10 and 12 seconds. So if you're going to communicate, the message has to be clear, it has to be direct, and it has to take place in a very short time window. And it's probably going to have to be more visual than before, because you're competing for those eyeballs, and you need to have something that happens very quickly. The number of cuts that take place in any one of these things is amazing. So you might want to keep that in mind. So I think those are the things that I would look at. So the message has to be tight, and it has to be delivered fast.
All right. So how do you see doing business going forward working with Gen Zers?
Well, I think Gen Zers are going to bend the curve. They're going to become more influential as they get older, because they're going to make more money and they'll spend more money. The question is, what will they be spending their money on? Will they be buying luxury items? Will they be buying those types of things, or will they be buying experiences? In fact, the thing that I find most interesting, assuming that politicians don't screw it up, is that the gig economy actually has a bunch of people who are in their 20s who are doing things that normally people would do when they're 60s, which is they're taking off time, they're digital nomads, they're doing all of these things that were just impossible a few years ago. Now, I have to tell you, for all of you who are out there who are Gen Zers, you should be very afraid, and I mean seriously very afraid, of the threat from government fiat. And no, that isn't a car, but government fiat of stamping on those things, because there's a whole societal push against the whole gig economy. The gig economy is an example of a certain level of flexibility, which is unnerving to society. and unnerving, especially to people who are authoritarians. That's why, I'm very much a believer in liberty. I'm very much a believer in free speech. And you really want to make sure that you understand that your gig economy, our gig economy, the entire economy is tied to this belief that technology is going to liberate us. No longer are we all going to have to go and join around in a circle around the steam engine and cheer our way and do whatever we have to do. The world is changing. It's changing quickly. And what you want to do is make sure that we can keep that process going. If you are, in fact, a ambitious Gen Zer, you're going to want to see the gig economy grow. So we're going to see that happen. And I think we're going to see it happen in spite of what governments are going to try to do to prevent that from taking place. And if the governments continue to persist in that, I think you're going to see a lot of underground circumstance. I mean, we already know that the governments have tried to curtail things like Uber and Lyft, and any place they've done it, there have been other ways that people get around it. The digital economy is going to continue going, and the Gen Zers are in an optimum position to take advantage of it because they don't have that same mental barrier. Anybody who's past a certain age, because generationally you didn't grow up with it, it's like learning a foreign language. And again, I don't know a foreign language, but I know, my father spoke 5 languages. Anytime you have somebody who speaks multiple languages, they have inside of their head, inside that brain, in that command center, is their native language that they think in. And they think in that language. And then what has to happen is they translate to the other language, and then the other language and the other language. And I saw this when I was in Italy, where we had a guy who could speak Spanish, he could speak English, but he couldn't speak Italian. So he would find people who could speak Italian. And then it was amazing to watch him, because every day Bill got better at speaking Italian, and it appeared that the Italians are getting better at speaking Spanish. So they would speak in Italian. He would then answer them in Spanish, and then he would translate it to English for us. Bizarre. Now, the point of that story, the point of the insight is that this is true in the digital world. And this is where we're going to see, absolutely, where the Gen Zers, their natural brain inside of them is that digital basis. So they don't have to do the translation. All the rest of us, we're going to be stuck with that. I don't know if you can ever natively or inherently change and rewire that you learn from a very young age, because it's tough to do, because you just don't have enough time to assimilate to that level. So I think that is going to change how we do things. And that means for anybody who's out there, if you want to sell to Gen Zers, learn as much as you can, know that they're digitally oriented. And most importantly, in all likelihood, when you start telling them things like, well, by the way, we have to send you something in the mail, they may not even know what that means and how it works. Last little funny story, which is, and I don't think I think she was actually, dare I say millennial, but she was working for me, and it was, she had to be a millennial. So we were sitting there, and I needed her to mail an envelope. Okay. Some of you may not know what this is. It's a piece of paper that we wrap up. We put this thing called a stamp. A stamp is something we get at a post office. Yes, I know, it's all scary. There's people drive around in Jeeps and stuff. But what I'm telling you is that she did not know how to address the envelope, how to put it together, and how to ship it out. Now, I was surprised, because she had, she was working on 2 degrees, but her family did not do any mailing. She'd never been around that. And I knew at that point in time that meant that the world was going to change. Now, by the way, for all you people who want to be counterintuitive, figure out ways to get things to people differently than they expected. Now, I know that all the Gen Zers out there are going to say, hey, I want to stay digital. I believe that in some ways that's true, but I can tell you that a digital sweater is less warm than a nice sweater that you get. And by the way, they're buying online anyway. So think about how to do that. If you do that, I think you'll find a way to make this work. Peter Drucker was absolutely right. The tsunami that is demographics swamps just about everything. We are going to continue to see the world moving forward. Parts of the world are getting older and not necessarily more vibrant. Other parts of the world are young and are maturing fast. What you want to do is you want to learn from these trends, watch for these trends. And most importantly, don't let yourself get stuck in time. Getting stuck in time is the worst thing in the world, because you end up with what I call the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, which is you never want to become irrelevant in the market. If you ever become irrelevant, whether it's in business or in your career or in your own life, becoming irrelevant is in fact worse than anything I can think of. I know you're going to say, but John, what about illness or death? Irrelevancy is a slow, painful slide to the end. So I'm John Paul Mendoza. This has been the Raging Verbalist. And for myself and Sandra, hopefully you've had a great time on number 97, old 97. And what you want to do is figure out, maybe it's hug a Gen Z. Well, wait a second. There's lots of concerns about that. Make sure that you communicate with them, that you may want to have a close encounter with them, and you may want to physically, well, you work out the negotiations and make sure that you get your everything signed off, because who knows, you know, people are getting really weird about that. So all I can say is hopefully you've learned a little bit about Gen Z and learned a little bit about demographics, and we are all wrapped up.